Hey, Dan here, and this video is all about how do you stay location independent, or for that matter, stay on track to reach absolutely any goal of yours. I have been living outside of my home country, Canada, since 2012, which is crazy now that I think about it. It has been 9 years. And one of the things that happens a lot when people go and they want to start traveling, living in a new country and say, okay, I want to spend 2 years living abroad. It's not uncommon for people to spend like 2 weeks and then go back home. And it all ends up a bit of a failure. Especially if you're doing so with your own business the whole time and relying on that as well, your funds and the bureaucracy and everything else, right? And I've been able to do it without really any serious chance of going back for these 9 years. And the other day I had a conversation with a client of mine, one of my early clients actually, who's now I would say more of a friend. And I know she had been living over in Europe and actually spent a week with my partner, Gabby. They were hanging out together in Prague. And I was getting a feeling this client of mine was going to be heading back home, she mentioned. She's like, I don't know, I'm not necessarily really feeling this. I'm thinking of calling it a day, basically. And so I wrote her a note and said, hey, give me a call. Let's chat this through. Not in a coaching way, just in a friend way. And one of the things, maybe I'll get into this actually later in the video, if you're curious about actual reasons why location independence can be tough and people run into issues. But essentially, she had run into some hardships with it, and her original plan was to spend some time in Prague and then come to where I am right now, which is Belgrade, Serbia, then maybe go explore Romania. She writes fiction and kind of dark fantasy, so this part of the world, the castles, the history, the tales, there's a lot to take in. And I knew that was her plan. So like, why are you going back to the US, right? And ultimately it was a bit tough. And her pattern, which is not uncommon for most of us, is when things are tough to just revert back the old way, right? So my goal is to live in Europe. I'm testing it out. I'm spending some time here. It's not quite what I expected. I'm having a bit of trouble. Go back home. It's not, let's try a different part of Europe or adjust my strategy and see what I could do to make it better. It's go back home. And this is a common pattern with everything, right? I'm starting my own business and I'm not quite sure, like it's not really working. It's not feeling great. Go back and get a job. What I'm going to suggest is keep your goal the same and adjust your approach to it, right? If your goal is to live in Europe and you're not really loving your experience in Prague, then try a different place. Then try adjusting your experience in Prague, right? So in a 15-minute conversation, we solved all this. Actually, Tara will be joining me in Belgrade in, I don't know, a week or so. She's coming down here. So it was all resolved by adjusting the approach to get there rather than getting stuck in, okay, I either am following this goal exactly how I planned or I quit and go back to the very beginning, which obviously doesn't serve us because that leads to these big swings you often see in NFP types, INFPs and ENFPs is like, okay, I'm quitting my job and doing my business. That didn't work. I have a job again. I have a business. I have a job. Like these massive things. Or in the case of location independence, flying from America or Canada to Europe and then flying all the way back, and then which gets a lot more expensive than just staying in Europe and trying to adjust things a little bit, trying to make some tweaks on the strategy, right? When we're trying something new, what we often do is if the first attempt doesn't feel great or work, we assume the entire destination we had in mind is now wrong for us, right? And I'll get into details with the location independence because I think it's a good example of how this happens, right? So what happened with this client of mine is she got stuck in the intermediate gray zone of travel, which I think is the death of location independence. It gets a lot of people, which is when you stay somewhere for like 3 weeks to 5 weeks, basically like around a month as a period. Because the problem with this is you're not a tourist where you're having more of an adventure and moving around. So tourist travel, I would consider, you spend 3 or 4 days or even a week somewhere. Maybe you're staying at hostels, you're doing all the sightseeing, you're meeting other tourists, you're, enjoying the moment and being really busy. And you're not someone who's actually moved and is location independent, which to me is, I would say you're like living somewhere if you spend 3 months there, where you're getting a long-term apartment, you're joining communities, you're probably joining, if you're working for yourself, a co-working space, and that. You're in this in-between zone where you don't really want to bother making good friends with people because you're going to leave in a little bit. This is especially harder if you're introverted. And people don't really want to be friends with you because why am I going to invest that much time making friends with you if you're leaving in a few weeks, right? And so you're sort of stuck in this in-between where you're not committing to communities, really getting into routines like joining a gym or taking classes or anything. But the fun of travel isn't there because you're not really doing everything every day. So you just kind of wake up and you're like, all right, what do I do now? What is going on? And this gives people a terrible perception of what it would actually be like to move somewhere new. And they end up, just feeling like kind of isolated, homesick. They don't really belong, and they end up, quitting and going home very often, unless, of course, Dan gives you a call and is like, what the hell are you doing? You're not going home. And then it gets resolved. So if you're planning a trip, with COVID kind of dying down in terms of travel restrictions and everything else, the next year, I assume a lot of people are thinking about trying something new. I really recommend either going tourist mode and spending short periods in places and being really busy and basically, not working, not having anything else to do but be a tourist, or spend much longer periods of time, go somewhere for 3 months with the intention of saying, hey, if I really like this place, I'll live there. And the nice part about that is it allows you also to start creating community because you're thinking, I might live here, and you don't just box yourself off and everything with it, right? Of places I've lived, I think I'm at 8 countries now. Most of them I had never visited before I moved there with a 3-month commitment. Costa Rica, Germany, Italy, Spain, Czech Republic I'd been for a weekend before I moved there. And Portugal, I had never been there before moving there for 5-6 months. And I'm a little crazy, I will fully admit that. But I find if you're going to like test a place, maybe testing a place is better for some people. Because like Italy, where I lived in the winter, it wasn't a great experience. Had I tested it, I would have been like, hell no. But the thing is in all the cases, I committed to the 3 months. And actually, I filmed a video earlier today about the differences between knowledge and wisdom. And wisdom tends to come from a commitment, fail or succeed, where you actually follow things through to the end. And then you get to know something on a lot deeper level than just sort of the book knowledge of something. So I would recommend if you do want to move and live in new places, maybe start off with a tourist trip. So say, hey, I'm going to spend 3 days in 10 cities each over a month in the part of the world I'm thinking about living, bounce around, see what you really like, and then move there and commit to 3 months as a minimum, or longer for that matter. And then you can really get a sense of living there rather than, again, this gray area is not good. The other thing to keep in mind is, like in the pursuit of many goals, living somewhere new is going to have lonely times. It's going to have difficult times. It's not all going to be rosy. And it's probably a lot easier now than it was 5-10 years ago in terms of online communities and everything else. But I kind of take that as, part of the challenge personally, where you go through some difficulties. It's like with entrepreneurship is the same thing. If it was super easy and you didn't have difficult days, then everyone would do it and then it wouldn't work. That's the basics of economics, right? If it was super easy to move abroad and find like your dream country and get set up there, then everyone would probably move over there from America and Canada, and that country would be ruined for people who actually appreciate a bit of the local culture, and it wouldn't work, right? Part of what makes things great is the difficulty of achieving them. It's what allows us to develop, but it is also just how supply and demand sort of works. If something is really easy to do, then it tends not to be as valuable or as valued, right? So to bring it back, when you find yourself facing hardship, what you really want to do is bring it back to the goal. What am I actually trying to achieve? And then change up your approach to getting there. Try a different way to get to the same place. And you'll find that ultimately there are dozens of ways to get to the same destination. And you just have to find one that fits with you and your personality and energy levels and everything else better. And, you know, we do this in everything in life. Like, you don't quit trying to walk. You don't quit trying to have sex or get in a relationship or, I don't know, grow taller or like, I mean, we do quit at some level on that, I suppose. But most things we do in life weren't like super easy. Like when you're a baby, you're just like getting up and walking around, start dancing. Like probably not. Maybe Cuban babies start dancing first and then walking. I don't know. But in general, that's not how life works. But for some reason, as we get older and try new things, not everyone, but a lot of people get a little less persistent, let's say. And I'm here to remind you of that persistence, that you should change your approach to getting there, not actually change your destination and quit on things. And if you do that, you're going to find you have a ton more success. And by facing those challenges, you'll change a lot of perhaps limiting beliefs. You'll gain more wisdom, you'll gain more knowledge about yourself, and just generally feel a lot better. Thank you for watching. My name is Dan. This is Dreams Around the World. And if you've enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like button and the subscribe button. Catch you in another video soon. One last thing, if you're an ENFP who loves being told how absolutely awesome you are and why you are the best in the world, well, head over to dreamsaroundtheworld.com/ENFP training, and you can get my free training series for ENFPs, where the first email is a pep talk. You'll see the subject line in your inbox, ENFPs are awesome. After you read it, reply to the email me back, and let me know what one of your favorite things to do is. See you in your inbox.